love and spirit, and who doesn't want love and who doesn't want spirit. But I have to face people who for 70 years, since 1920, have been trying to massacre us. So don't throw around words such as Khomeini and so on. If you want to argue with me about facts. But don't call names, because one, it doesn't bother me, and secondly, it adds nothing to the discussion. Let's talk about facts, what the Arabs did to us, what they would want to do to us, and then what's your answer if you don't like mine.
London, England, you're next. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. I would like to commend Mr. Kahane for his work. But I have a question. I was in Ginot Shomron in the West Bank 2 weeks ago, and I was struck at the fact that the settlers are very much armed in automatic weapons and the like, and they seem to have a kind of an all-right attitude to the Arabs around. Now, my question is, what do you think of what's going on in the West Bank now with the settlers being armed as much, and whether you think there will be a solution with the threat of the Arabs around the settlements?
There isn't a day, not a day, in which settlers are not attacked in their cars by Arabs who surround them. What do you want them to do? To pelt the Arabs with flowers? They're living in a terribly dangerous area, surrounded by people who hate them. Every week, another one is killed, another Jew is killed. Of course they have weapons. Of course they have weapons. Now, what will be with the West Bank will be one of two things. Either, and this is whether it is Paris or Shamir, either they will be allowed to give up land, which will lead to a tragedy, or not only the settlers, but all sane, normal people who remember those terrible days of 1967 will get up and say, we will never allow you to leave that land. We demand the annexation of those lands, because that is justice and that is Jewish, and we want an exchange of populations. We took in 800,000 Jews from Arab countries. Let's now give them the Arabs from our country.
Seattle, Washington, go ahead.
First of all, Rabbi, I'd like to thank you for appearing on television. And I'd like to say that just sitting here watching you, that the picture you present and your honesty and everything, it appears to me you're a man of God. Not the same picture that appears in the press. I'd also like to ask you a question. You're a Jew and you're a practical man. How would you go about, in detail, I know you've done this 1,000 times, but how would you go about moving the Palestinians to a separate independent state? It would obviously require enormous amounts of money if the Palestinians ever agree to do it. It would require a great many things. And I wonder, could you just sort of outline, if tomorrow you were the Prime Minister of Israel, what would you do in detail a little more?
Okay, three brief points. First of all, I don't say that every single Arab has to leave. We offer them a choice, that any Arab who is ready to stay inside the country as a non-citizen will have full rights, full personal rights, all of his personal rights, his cultural rights, his social rights, and economic rights, and so on. But he will not be a citizen. He has nothing to say in our country, the Jewish state. If he will accept that, he may stay and live, and then we are obligated to treat him or her just as any other Jew. Secondly, the Poles and the Czechs in 1945, after World War II, expelled not 1 million people or 2 million people, they expelled 12 million ethnic Germans from their countries. People who had lived in their countries for 1,000 years, in Silesia, Sudetenland, Danzig, and so on. And you know, 12 million people, because those people in pre-World War II Europe were a fifth column and brought on Hitler and caused untold agonies to the Poles and the Czechs. Now, the Poles and the Czechs didn't, after World War II, didn't sit back and say how to do it. They said, we have the force now, we have the power now, and never again do we have to suffer this. And they moved them out in a very, 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 very brief time, and the Germans went. They didn't fight because they didn't have the weapons to. If I were the prime minister, I would offer the Arabs a choice. If you want to stay, stay under those conditions. If not, you are going to leave. And I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. We would move them into Jordan. And don't ask me, but what if Jordan doesn't want them? Of course Jordan doesn't want them. But I don't either. And what in the world makes Jordan such a legal state, if you know its history? Let the Arabs move into Jordan and let them create any state there, any state that they want. Let them call it Seattle or Palestine or anything. And I'll be happy to help them.
What's your reaction to his statement that you are not the way you appear in the press? Or that his reaction to you?
That's probably one of the most important statements possible. I think there is an outrage that the news media is so unbelievably biased. The major newspapers of this country have not given me an opportunity to be interviewed in Israel, despite the fact that I was at the center of many, many, many things. Never interviewed me. I think that there is a very, very definite attempt to paint a certain image, and the news media do that. If they like someone, the image is just—it's an incredible thing. If they like Jesse Jackson, they'll overlook every anti-Semitic comment. They'll overlook the fact of his tax problem. They'll overlook everything if they like him. And if they don't like you, and especially if they're liberal and I'm not, which is true, they'll paint you with every incredible smear in every brush. I think that's terrible. A free press is free only if it's also a fair press.
Is it true in Israel as well as the United States?
It's even worse. At least here I can appear on television, radio, and so on. In Israel, when I was a Knesset member, for 4 years I was not allowed to appear on state television and radio. It's much worse there.
Grand Haven, Michigan. You're next. Good evening.
Hi there, Rabbi.
Hi.
I'm pretty new to this subject, and I was just wondering if you could fill me in and explain to me how or what Egypt.
I'm sorry, caller. You're going to have to ask your question again. We're having a little problem hearing you.
I was just going to wonder. I was wondering what role Egypt and Mr. Mubarak is playing in this whole affair.
What they're playing, or what they can play. What they're playing is there is no question that they are on the side of the PLO. Of course, this is true. I mean, they're not. It isn't as if Egypt is some outsider, an objective viewer, a fair person, an arbiter. Of course not. It's an Arab state, which is violently anti-Israel. One has to see the news media there, which is again state hatred of Israel, anti-Semitism there, the vulgar, base kind of anti-Israel cartoons and so on. They have no role to play. They have no role to play. There are two parties over here: Israel and the Palestinians, and there has to be face-to-face coverage. And I want to say something here. I've always been of the opinion that Israel should sit down with the PLO, not because I like the PLO, but because the PLO represents the Palestinian people. Of course this is true. And by not sitting down with them, but saying we'll sit down with Jordan or with Syria, but not with the PLO, we have created this incredible delusion that there are moderate Arabs and extremist Arabs. There are no moderate Arabs. There are clever Arabs and stupid ones. The stupid ones say what they mean. The clever ones mean the same thing, but they've gotten clever about it. Sit down with the PLO and tell them, no, you don't get anything from us. However, if you'd like to take over Jordan, we can help you. But that's about it. Sit down with them and tell them no. That's what has to be done.
Pat Chog, Long Island, New York. Good evening.
Yes. Yes, hello, Rabbi.